Hey, it's time for TV Skywriter.
Greetings, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to TV Skywriter, local edition. I'm Patricia A. Murray, and this show emanates from Durham, North Carolina. We have a very special guest because we'll be talking about the SAT and ACT. I know parents' ears are perking up right now because they're very concerned about their kids getting to a good school. So we have today Chris Ryan. He's the Vice President of Instruction with Manhattan Prep. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Pat. Glad to be here.
Now, we're going to talk about your special workshop that you'll be holding at Barnes & Noble at Streets at Southpoint. But first, let me ask you what Manhattan Prep is first.
So we're about 15 years old. We are a specialized boutique test prep company. Our historic roots are in the GMAT, which is the Business School Admissions Test. Mm-hmm. But since then, we've expanded into the GRE, another graduate school test, the LSAT for law school, and now getting back to my own personal roots, because I was a high school teacher for a number of years, the SAT and the ACT. So that's very exciting.
Okay. Let's mention this workshop. So at the Streets at Southpoint, Barnes & Noble, this coming Saturday, we're talking about June 6th, 2015, you're going to have from what I understand, it's going to be really high-powered, not just a casual drop-in workshop, but a workshop where the student has to be there from 1 until 2.
That's right.
To get the full effect of the workshop.
That's correct. So we're having this to celebrate the publication of our ACT 5-pound book. It is suitable for holding doors open even in a heavy wind. It weighs more than 5 pounds. It actually is a little closer to 6 pounds, which is kind of crazy. But we give you a whole lot of problems. So to celebrate the publication of this book, we're doing some events around the country, and I'm very excited to be doing this event at the Streets at Southpoint Barnes & Noble. I live in Chapel Hill and am actually moving in a few weeks to Carborough. And I went to Duke for grad school, so and my wife went to Chapel Hill for undergrad, so we kind of have roots all over the place, and relatives in Cary.
Do you dare watch sporting events together?
No, and in addition, my wife's brother played for NC State. Her other brother played for East Carolina. I get it from all sides in the family. Played football, that is. So back to the workshop. The workshop is called Get Ready for the June ACT, which is only a week later, June 13th. You might think, well, what am I doing a week beforehand focusing an hour with you, Chris? Well, if you are taking the June 13th ACT, we think this is a great workshop for you. If you're not taking the June ACT, but going to take it sometime in the fall or next year, we also think it's a great workshop. It's not just focused on that 1 week out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, but even more, I'm going to talk about how to prepare, how to work on your process, because there's a lot of content, right? But speaking to you, the student who are going to take this test, you already know most of the content. You know the Pythagorean theorem. You know these things that you've been doing in school for the last several years. You do know them. And a lot of the issue people have with these tests is translating that knowledge into the test, into your performance on the test. So that's why I emphasize good process. So I'm going to take you through a 5-step process, and then you're going to practice. This is a tour of the gym, but guess what? You're going to pick up some weights. We're going to do a workout.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, this challenge that the students have, do you think it's mostly due to nerves or over preparation or what?
I'd say that's a big part of it. These tests, the SAT, the ACT, are high stakes. They matter in your college application. Schools care about them. It's not the only thing, thank goodness, by far that they care about, but schools do care about these tests. So there's no way for it not to be stressful in a certain way. It's kind of like a big game. You can't pretend, well, the big game doesn't really matter. No, it's a big game, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the nerves are a big piece of it. And then unfamiliar format, the timing is intense. You got to move quickly on these tests. And so you've got to make, often the test that you take in high school, well, it's about the last chapter. Maybe the end of the year you have a final, but it's a long final on one subject. Here you're jumping around between math and reading and science and writing, grammar, and it's a little bit of everything, right? So you very quickly got to orient yourself. What am I doing right now? Oh, I'm doing geometry. Oh, what am I doing now? Now I'm doing algebra from a totally different course. Now I'm doing, middle school math, fractions, decimals, percents, all that stuff, and you're jumping around. You rarely have to do that on a high school test in your geometry class. It's all just the stuff you've been doing. So that's one thing that makes it pretty different.
And also, I'm assuming that there could be a problem with the student knowing and remembering, pretty much everything, they have studied, but the way the questions asked might be odd to the student.
That's right. And these really aren't content tests, I should say, in the sense of, they test you on your knowledge of the Pythagorean theorem, but they don't sit there and say, hey, what's the Pythagorean theorem? Rather, they ask you a problem that involves a right triangle. So you have to do exactly what you're saying, which is sum it up like, well, what is this about? You have to classify the problem. They don't advertise in every case, well, the problem is really about this subject or about this topic. With, say, the English, there's just, you're reading a passage. It could be someone talking about, I wrote a passage about Mama Dip's restaurant, actually, for this book. I had just eaten there, and I needed a passage, and I thought, oh, I'm going to write this about a great restaurant. So as you're going along reading about Mama Dip's, here's an underline, and you got to determine, is the part in the underline okay as it is, or do I have to change it for one of these other options? And you're never told, hey, this is a punctuation problem. Hey, this is subject-verb agreement. This is, you got to be able to spot the triggers and say, oh, this is what it's about, and not just to rely on your ear. If you could rely on your ear, then everyone would get 100% on these tests, but they make them tricky. So exactly what you're saying, they disguise what they're talking about.
Yeah. Now, as a person who's from Kenwood High School's class of 69, I need to ask you, and that's in Chicago, I need to ask you what the difference is between the SAT and the ACT, because way back when I was a kid, we would ask what the difference is, and we were told, oh, don't worry about it because only the SAT is important. Nobody cares about the ACT. Has that changed, and is there a real difference between the two?
Yes, it has changed. There are now more ACT test takers or tests taken than there are SATs taken. Slightly more. So they're about neck and neck around the country. It used to be that the SAT dominated on the coasts, the ACT in the middle of the country. Now it's all mixed up. Both tests are everywhere. Schools take both tests. So, yeah. So what's different between these tests? Well, the SAT has evolved a lot over the years. You look at an SAT from like 1947 or something, it's totally different. So where is the SAT right now? It tests the same underlying skills as the ACT. It's reading, writing, arithmetic, and a little more than arithmetic, right? Geometry and algebra. So the same stuff, but it asks, I would say, for instance, the math on the SAT, shorter, it's fewer problems, but they're a little bit more complicated, maybe 2 or 3 steps to the problem. So the disguise factor, you kind of got to go through a little bit of a maze, especially on the tougher problems. ACT problems tend to be 1 or 2 steps, but you have more of them to get through. There are a lot of little format differences like that. With the math on the ACT, you got 60 minutes, 60 problems, minute per problem.
Oh my God.
With the math on the SAT, it comes in 3 sections, and none of those sections is longer than 25 minutes. So it's shorter doses, fewer problems, but more intense per problem, because there are possibly more steps. Not every problem. So that's one example of the differences. Now, the SAT is changing in March 2016, and it's changing in a big way, probably to react to the growth of the ACT. So the SAT, from what we've seen, only some material has been released so far. In fact, at the end of this month, at the end of June, the new official guide of the SAT is being published. That's when we'll get a lot of material, and there's already some material available on Khan Academy that has been made public by the College Board, the makers or the owners of the SAT. Really what they're doing is moving it in the direction of the ACT. I'll give you an example. The ACT has long not penalized anyone for getting a wrong answer. So you put down D instead of C on the ACT, no penalty. The SAT for a long time has had, and still right now today has, a small penalty for the wrong answer, a 1/4 point for picking D instead of the right answer C. Well, that creates more stress for people in picking. Like, you're like, I don't want to guess, because if I guess and I guess wrong, I'm going to get penalized. And the fact is that that penalty was only there to make adjustments statistically, that you couldn't guess your way to a better score. But the SAT realized, oh, this is really the nerves point you made earlier. This is really causing stress among students.
The students know this. I mean, I wasn't aware. The fact that you get penalized in the SAT, I didn't know that the kids would know that.
They do. It's interesting, because I think over the years, it used to be the SAT was very secretive, and also there wasn't a lot of prep for the SAT. It was the original acronym. SAT stood for Scholastic Aptitude Tests. Like, what is your ability? What is your underlying ability? Well, then that changed to achievement, and finally the SAT doesn't stand for anything now, because they realized it doesn't really, you can change. This isn't measuring some inherent quality. This is a preppable test, like any other test. You can't be tested on something that you can't prepare for. So kids and families now are learning more and more. There's more and more information available, free or low cost, from places like Khan Academy, places like us, Manhattan Prep, and other places, including the test makers themselves, to help people know what's coming, like the penalty.
Okay. Now, when it comes to both the SAT and ACT, I know that it does cost. You have to pay to take the test. So would you recommend that students take both? Or, because you said that now schools accept both SAT and ACT. Back when I was a kid, certain schools took SAT, certain schools took ACT. So should students, is that too much to ask of students to take both and then choose the best test scores to submit? Or to have this, the schools pay attention to?
I think this is a great question, Pat. I think that in general, taking both and preparing for both is so much work that unless you're really planning this over the course of years, where you're going to take the PSAT, which is before the SAT, and then maybe take the ACT 1 month, and then in a whole different season, take the SAT. And unless you really spread this out, it is going to be too much. You shouldn't take the SAT 1 month and the ACT the next month. I think that there are ways, though, that you can determine which test is right for you. I'll give you a couple of ways. One is to take a full practice diagnostic test that you can get one for free from the makers of the ACT at actstudent.org. And you can get one for free from College Board at collegeboard.org. That's the maker or the owner of the SAT.
That's amazing.
So you can take a full practice test on each and see how you do. Also on our site, if you go to manhattanprep.com, and at the top there are different menu items. You pick ACT/SAT and go to the home page on that, and you can actually download a free diagnostic that is focused very much on the differences between the current SAT and the current ACT. So you can do that diagnostic in just 45 minutes and answer a few questions afterwards, and that will help guide you. As opposed to taking a full practice test, SAT and the ACT are each about 4 hours long when you add in the breaks. I mean, it's a lot. So that can help you, our diagnostic, or simply doing a full practice test of each can give you a sense of, well, which one do I think I like better and do better at.
Okay. Now, for Saturday's workshop, where you'll be preparing high school students for these tests, what will happen? Because you have 1 hour, and I assume you want the students to be there right before 1 p.m. at Barnes & Noble Street at Southpoint in Durham, right?
That's right.
Okay. So what are they going to do for this 1 hour?
So we're going to talk through that 5-step process that I told you about. I'm going to keep some of the details for the workshop, but I'll tell you one thing that we focus on is step 1 of the process. I'll go ahead and say, which is you've got to orient yourself to the world. Take a little bit of time to get into the world of the passage or the problem that you're dealing with. Because, like I talked about earlier, you're switching from one thing to the next, even within math or within English. You got to give yourself a little bit of time to say, well, what is this problem? As opposed to, oh, I got to write something. I immediately grab onto one thing that I recognize here. You've just landed on a new planet. So go ahead and acclimate yourself to your new surroundings, right? That'll take a number of seconds. And I'll tell you our last step, which is as you're bubbling in, take a deep breath. And that's because what you have to do is clear your mind, bank that last problem, and move on to the next. You talked about nerves. It's a good way. We are physical, biological creatures, and simply taking a big, deep breath and letting it out as a habit every time you bubble in an answer. That helps you to clear your mind, put the last problem in the bank, get ready for the next one. Because this is a marathon, not a sprint. You got to be ready to pace yourself, and that kind of, it seems simple and silly almost, but that kind of thing. So what students should bring, we're going to give you a sample practice set. You can choose either math or a reading set. If you want to do the math, it's a good idea to bring a calculator, but you don't have to have a calculator to do the math set.
Are you allowed to use calculators now?
Yes, you are. That's right. On the ACT, you are. On the SAT, that's on both the ACT and the SAT you are, but the SAT is changing so that one part will be no calculator and another part will be with a calculator. So these things change. Yep.
Wow. Wow. I had no idea you could use a calculator.
Yep. And that changes the kinds of questions that get answered. For instance, and this is true of our graduate tests as well. On the GMAT, you don't get a calculator. On the GRE, you do. So what kind of questions are asked depends on what tools you have available, which makes sense.
Okay. Wow. Okay. What if I'm just curious about students with disabilities. How do students who have blindness issues or hearing impaired, how do they deal with the SAT and ACT? Are there any differences?
Great question. Yes, absolutely. There are big differences, and each of the organizations, the ACT, which is also the name of the organization that runs the ACT, and College Board, each of them are aware that not only because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, but also ethically and morally, because these tests are gatekeepers to our higher education system. they need to offer accommodations. So anyone with a documented learning difference of any kind can apply to, now you have to make sure you give enough time and work with your college counselor in your school who will know all the ins and outs. But essentially, it's providing the documentation on your disability, and these organizations are well versed with providing accommodations that could range from extra time to, even in the case of, say, blindness. The test is, I believe, read to you aloud, and you are given very clearly defined by law, even accommodations to make sure that you're not at a disadvantage. In some ways, these organizations are even more accountable to the ADA and to our society to provide those kind of accommodations. Sometimes a school, an individual school, can sneak by and maybe not provide proper accommodations, but these large national organizations that are responsible for these tests, one good thing is there's a lot of sunlight on them. So they are well versed at providing these accommodations. And if you have a learning difference or disability that's documented, you can apply for those accommodations.
That's good. I used to read for a blind student when I was in college. And that was before they had the talking calculators. But I do know they also have talking calculators. So I suppose they'd have to be in another room or something.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's why there's some time that is required not only to get your application together in that sense, and make sure it clears through channels. You should be applying months ahead to make sure that you have accommodations. Then the testing center. The centers around, you might have a more limited range of which centers you're able to take the test at, but there has to be one that's available. And certainly in our area in the Triangle, accommodations will be made.
Okay, that's really, really good to know, and very important for parents
That's right.
with disabilities. Now, when it comes to this Barnes & Noble workshop, this Saturday, 1 p.m. on the dot, do you have a limit of how many students should show up? Do they pre-register, or do they just show up?
We don't have a pre-registration for this one, so students can just come by. We also are offering an online version of the workshop that very same morning at 10:30 online. So you, if you can't make it into the streets at Southpoint, then you can go to our website, and the free workshop online you have to register for. So you do have to go through a quick registration process on our site, again, manhattanprep.com. And I believe it's /college takes it to you. If you look at ACT, SAT in the menu, that'll get you there. It says free workshops. But the one at the Barnes & Noble, and it's upstairs. I've already scoped out the space. It's right by the cooking area. Gonna be, so come on by. I can't wait. I was up at a Barnes & Noble in Manhattan a couple of weeks ago doing this workshop at the Union Square Barnes & Noble up there. And I'm excited. You don't have to buy the book. That's totally fine. We are talking about it, but only briefly. This really is a celebration of our getting into the ACT in a big way. And so far, reviews are pretty good, so we're excited. And one reviewer on Amazon said probably the best thing you can ever buy for your kid in high school, which I was very proud of and kind of blown away by. So
Very big deal.
yeah. So as a former high school teacher myself, I taught in Long Beach, California. I taught in outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I taught in Greensboro, right down the road. High school physics and chemistry. This is a return to my roots. I love teaching high school kids. So I can't wait to see you on Saturday if you're coming to this.
Okay, folks, so you know what to do. Now, the website is manhattanprep.com. So be sure to check that out. And if you know high school students who are college bound, tell them or take them, which is even better, to Barnes & Noble, Street at Southpoint, here in Durham, North Carolina. be there right before 1 o'clock. I suppose you'll have a bunch of desks set up.
We have some chairs set up. People will come up. It's by the cooking section, as I said, is a table, and we will handle all comers. So I'm ready for it.
I'm going to give one crazy suggestion because
Please.
you know, as a former high school teacher, you know a lot of these kids skip breakfast, right? They just rush off to school. They just jump on the bus or car, or whatever.
Bad news.
And they totally, and even worse, they might like grab a piece of cake or something on the way out. So I'm going to ask the students who are going to be taking part in this workshop to try something new and have a good night's rest, which is wild, right? Ooh,
Yeah, no substitute for sleep.
right. And a real breakfast, and see how that feels and see how that works out for you. Because I have a very vague memory of being a kid preparing for the SAT, and we were told not to over prepare. That you can study and study and study, but the night before get a 8
That's
hour,
right.
get a good breakfast and relax. Don't even study that day. Just totally relax and then take the test.
I agree with you, Pat, that this is not a crammable type of test. This isn't, oh my goodness, I need to know something. I need to spit up what I just read about the Great Depression on my history quiz this morning, right? You know, and you're, hey buddy, did you read the 5 pages for, you know, this isn't facts so much as process. Yeah, people, you do know already the facts that you need to know, and where there are little gaps, we'll fill those in. You'll fill those in, but at that point, what you want to do is know what you know. And so, even the week before, you don't want to be doing a whole lot of brand new material. You want to be more reviewing material that you have already seen, for the most part, and not just looking it over, but really doing something with it again, forcing yourself to recreate it. Don't just, there's sort of a false fluency from just glancing at stuff, but certainly the day before, the night before, you want that good night's sleep. Morning of, you want that good breakfast. And I'm going to tell you some about some recent research, Pat, that's pretty cool. Only out in the last couple of years. So on these long 4-hour tests, you got to make a lot of decisions. That's what each of these problems is. You got C, B, A. You're making a whole lot of decisions. And there's a phenomenon called decision fatigue, which is your brain gets really tired of making decisions. And another term for it is ego depletion, like your energy runs down, like those old Cheerios commercials. Remember those when you ran out of energy and just sort of clumped over?
Yeah.
Well, something to bring to the test. You can't do this during the actual test, but during a break, you can take a swig of a Gatorade or some kind of lightly sugared water. Now, I'm not a big fan of processed sugar. However, in this case, there's a reason. The research shows that if you take a little bit of sugar in water, that's what your brain eats. Your brain is very finicky. The only thing it eats is glucose. So the ego depletion, that drop in mental energy that comes from making lots of decisions, to eat a quick bite or two of an energy bar. I'm not talking about chugging a big gulp of some sweetened over whatever. I'm talking about taking a good solid sip or two of a Gatorade or an energy drink like that. And it's important that it be actual sugar. And the reason for this is this goes right into your brain and helps you overcome the effects of that decision fatigue. And that's good because then you go right back into the math, or 2 minutes later, because you got a 5-minute break and you're back in and you got to read and you got to go. It's kind of like someone running a marathon. Yeah. What are they? They can take swigs of water, but they should also take swigs of Gatorade right along the way. I'm not talking about chugging a big gulp, but a small bit of energy drink like that. And I'm not talking about any of the other additives or any weird things like Red Bull or whatever. Just talking about a little bit of a vitamin water or a Gatorade is actually a good thing. So that's a really important tip for managing your physiology during this whole process.
That's a new one on me, and I'm really glad you said that, because those long, intense tests will wear you out.
That's right.
That's really good information. So, Chris, anything else you wanted to tell us about before we go?
Well, folks, I just want to say thank you so much, Pat, for having me on. And our whole point, what drives us at Manhattan Prep, is we're all about the belief that test prep can and should be real education. And so we've placed our bet on having the best teachers we can find. And so we do a lot to find them, do a lot to compensate them and train them and so forth. So we've placed our bet on great teaching, and then everything else follows from that: our books, our courses, all the materials and so forth. So and we think that students should demand that not accept mediocre teaching. Really look for great teaching, because we believe that's the path to transformation. And that's what you really sometimes need for these things, to overcome, not just learn a new fact or a small new skill, but really overcome, say, for instance, with math. When I was in grade school, 3rd grade, I was really bad at the times tables, slow. I would do my 5s with the slow hat, my 1s, not just like a little slash, but the one with the hat on it and the foot. Yeah. And so I was terrible. I'd get through 15 and it's like done time. And I majored in physics in college, lots of math in that. I was fortunate that I had family. I remember my older brother helping me overcome my math anxiety and my slow writing. And to not internalize that, not take that as, oh, this means you're bad at math, Chris. Wow. And so I overcame that. And he was teaching me algebra in 3rd grade. Like, oh, 2x, like if 2 times a number is 6, what's the number? And I'm like, 3. And he said, you just did algebra. And I was so proud I could do algebra in 3rd grade. Oh, well, this is the kind of thing that I wish every kid could have. So that's part of our mission, is I can't put it any other way, to right wrongs that happened already, where you've been sorted into, well, because you were slow at the math times tables in 3rd grade, therefore you're bad at math. I'm here to tell you you're not. You don't have to be. You gotta, now you might have to work to overcome the deficits that have accumulated, but there's nothing in your way. So that's what animates us.
I like that. I like your passion as well.
Oh, thank you.
So, folks, that was Chris Ryan. We learned an awful lot. He's with Manhattan Prep, so be sure to check out the website. And like I said, be sure to check out that workshop. It's going to be held this Saturday, June 6th, 1 o'clock on the dot, Barnes & Noble Street at Southpoint. Now, if you'd like to be on TV Skywriter, I do have a Sunday show. That's where I talk to people around the country about their books and their jobs and interesting ideas and whatnot. This is TV Skywriter Local Edition. Both of them are on YouTube, so there's no real difference. It's just that TV Skywriter Local Edition is usually held during the week to accommodate the local nonprofits and other people who aren't really available on Sundays. So be sure to write to me, Durham Skywriter @gmail.com, if you'd like to be on the show. Be sure to read the Durham Skywriter. The June issue, the way it works is that I kind of insert, because it's now a website and not a newspaper in print anymore. So I kind of roll in the information during the first week. So you'll see, if you go to durhamskywriter.com, you'll see the information changing from day to day until next week it'll be totally finalized. So if you have information for the June issue, write to me, durhamskywriter @gmail.com or yahoo.com. You can call 919-809-9682. Thanks again, Chris, for being on the show.
Thank you, Pat.
Absolutely. See you folks next time. Ciao for now.